If memory serves, I was awoken that morning, the 22nd of April, 1992, at about 6:30 a.m. Now, I am not and never have been a morning person, but my wife, my ex-wife now, was awake and restless. "Everything okay?" I asked. "I'm not sure," she replied, "but I think it started." So the day was here, something we'd been waiting for over 9 months. She was in labor, and we were about to become parents. That day was stressful, frightening, and confusing. We were first-time parents, and while we had studied and read and gone to classes, we really had no idea what we were getting into. As we had been warned might happen, my ex-wife, for simplicity's sake, we'll just call her LG, went into what could be called a nesting mode. And so, at 7 a.m. or so, with her in the early stages of labor, she decided we need to rearrange the entire apartment because the furniture wasn't positioned the way she wanted it. And so we did. We, of course, contacted the doctor, described the symptoms, and he confirmed, yes, it's time to come in. There was, however, no particular rush to get to the hospital, as we had hours to go. We didn't have a car, so we took a taxi to the hospital, and I think we arrived at about 10 a.m. The pregnancy had been more or less a textbook case until just a few weeks earlier, at week 38, at which time LG developed preeclampsia, a type of high blood pressure. At that time, the doctor considered inducing labor. I was, to be honest, a very impatient father-to-be. And when they almost induced labor 2 weeks early, I was elated, only to have my hopes dashed when they decided, in the end, it was not necessary. My only consolation was that the doctor, and almost everyone else, to be honest, assured me that in just another week or two the baby would be born. So I waited. Impatiently perhaps, but I waited. And we reached week 40. Nothing happened. Week 41. Nothing. Our unborn child was, clearly, very stubborn. And I can't imagine, for the record, where that trait might come from. In a regular visit at the start of week 42, the doctor advised that if labor didn't start on its own soon, he would go ahead and induce labor. And being the terrible human being that I am, I was delighted. Okay, to be fair, I'm not really a terrible human being. I was just that excited to be a father, to be dad. But in the end, inducing labor was not needed, since on that morning, labor started on its own, naturally. After we arrived at the hospital, of course, the labor process continued, and pain began to mount. LG was given something for the pain, but it didn't help. The labor process continued, but the baby did not progress towards birth. The pain increased. LG was given an epidural, but it still did not help with the pain. The doctor checked again to make sure the baby wasn't breech, which it wasn't, but it was facing the wrong way, so the wrong part of the head was trying to come through, making the birth process harder and more painful. Clearly, this baby wasn't having any of this birth nonsense and was determined not to be born that day. The morning passed into a very long afternoon, and eventually that long afternoon became evening. I think it was about 7 p.m. when the doctor announced that he would need to do a cesarean section. It took a while to get everything ready. An anesthesiologist had to be called in from home, it took a while to get the operating room ready, and some other things. So I think it was about 9 p.m. before the procedure actually started. LG was given a spinal block, which finally did something to ease the pain a bit, although she did say that even then, she could still feel something of the procedure, kind of a tugging or a pulling. Now, I don't like blood or anything like that any more than I like mornings. I don't even watch medical TV shows because the fake blood will gross me out. The insides are supposed to be inside for a reason. But for some unknown reason, I thought I could take looking at this procedure. So I lifted up and looked over the divider towards where the procedure was taking place on her abdomen, and realized immediately that I was wrong, and the doctor and the hospital almost had a passed out father to go along with the mother on the operating table. But I held on and didn't pass out, somehow. Eventually, however, the doctor looked up and said, "Congratulations, it's a girl." My daughter, despite her stubborn refusal, had been born. And after just a few minutes, I was asked, "Would you like to hold her?" That does seem like a very silly question because of course I wanted to hold her. And so, for the first time, I held my daughter in my arms. I think of myself as a reasonably good communicator, but words completely fail me when I try to explain how I was feeling that night and at that moment. Amazed, awed, overwhelmed, panicked. But these are all just words, and they can't begin to adequately describe what I was experiencing. So yes, it was an incredibly long and stressful day, but it was undoubtedly one of the greatest days of my life then, and remains so now. I have not always been the best father, but I have always tried my best. And I have a beautiful daughter, now a grown woman, who is accomplishing things that I never could, who has so much to offer, so much potential, that I cannot help but to be in awe of her, to be proud of her, and to respect her and everything that she is accomplishing. You know, I do remember something else on that day. I will always remember when the doctor came into the recovery room just a bit later, and he looked at us and said, "You know, I knew at our last appointment on Monday that I was going to need to do a cesarean section, but I thought it best to just wait and see." He was a very lucky man, because if LG had been able to move at that point, I'm quite sure he would not have survived. Be good. And if you can't be good, be wicked well.